I'm wondering, when are white people going to start listening to the Black community? When are we going to admit that they were right about Trump? They were right during the civil rights era. They were right about abolition. And now we know, now we can see they've been right about Trump all along. They got our attention during the George Floyd protests, but we didn't listen. We were just like fair weather fans. But if we could ever get behind this community, if we could ever draw from their wisdom and their knowledge of what America really is at the cellular level, because they've seen this all along, and there is so much we could learn if we would just humble ourselves and move out of the spotlight just for a moment and let them speak.
Every single thing that Kamala Harris warned us about if Donald Trump was elected president is happening right now. And every single thing that Donald Trump said would happen if Kamala Harris was elected president is what is happening under his presidency. Kamala Harris told us that Donald Trump was going to deploy U.S. troops on U.S. citizens, and he already did that. Kamala Harris told us that Donald Trump was going to start a war with Iran. That has already happened. Kamala Harris told us that Donald Trump was going to strip millions of people from their health care. And now Republicans have just signed a bill to make sure that is going to happen. Every single thing that Kamala Harris said would happen during a Donald Trump presidency is happening. But this country will continue to not believe what a black woman would say, but believe what a white man who's been credibly accused of sexual assault multiple times, instead of just believing a black woman. Black women are the most educated and most intelligent women in this country. And until we start believing them, this is exactly what is going to continue happening.
Have you ever noticed that everything Donald Trump touches turns to a big pile of steaming shit? It doesn't matter if we're talking about the economy, foreign policy, domestic policy, even something so simple as manners. It goes from being thriving and robust to a big stinking pile of caca.
Well, the Democrats were right again, and Trump is doing such a miserable job at running this economy that for the second time this year already, the Fed is being forced to lower interest rates. And just to put this in perspective, the last time the Fed had to lower interest rates was in March of 2020, right after Joe Biden got in office. And the reason they had to lower interest rates is because Trump had just gotten done completely tanking the economy, and our unemployment rate was at 14.7%, the highest since the Great Depression. Good job, Trump. And now we're seeing that all over again because Trump has no idea what he's doing in this economy. Inflation continues to rise, and Trump's jobs numbers are so bad that he fired the person giving him the numbers, and then the next month he got even worse numbers. Nice job. And at this point, honestly, I think he has to keep the government shut down because he doesn't want us to know what his jobs numbers are because they're that bad.
Let's make Argentina great again. Let's make Israel better. It's anything but America first. And now he's going to take away food stamps the whole month of November. And let me tell you what, 1 out of every 5 people that are on food stamps are veterans. They have fought for this country, and President Trump is punishing poor people for the No Kings rally. That's what he's doing. See, President Trump doesn't want to be president anymore. He wants to be the king. He's already established everything that he has to do. And look, you've seen what them young Republicans were writing, and you've seen that guy come out and say, well, this is just what all Republicans do and say behind the scenes. It's no big deal. This is how we all feel. They're all racist, male chauvinist, pedophiles, and now they want us to accept that. Look, President Trump's ratings are dropping like the rent on a burning building. He doesn't care that you don't agree with what he's doing. He's just going to start punishing the poorest of us all. And that's making America great.
Living in America right now feels like a punishment. You wake up already behind, you go to work just to stay broke, and you watch the cost of everything rise while your paycheck doesn't move an inch. Groceries are a luxury. Rent is robbery. Healthcare is a joke. And somehow we're the ones blamed for not budgeting better. People are working 2-3 jobs and still choosing between food or gas. Families are crammed into apartments because buying a house became a fantasy. You can't afford to get sick. You can't afford to rest. You can't afford to exist. But they keep telling us the economy is strong. Strong for who?
For decades, black Americans have always tried to warn people about the authoritarian regime of the United States, trying to warn them how it will harm them. It will also hurt white people. But guess who can't listen? They can't listen because they think that the system has protected them as it used to protect them. Majority of white people voted Mr. Donald Trump because of it's like a cult that he's gonna be supporting us, he's gonna be protecting us, without seeing the true nature of this type of person. Black people have learned from past mistakes. Why am I saying mistakes? They are mistakes because they were lied to. And when they were lied to, they saw these people for who they are. And that means that they learned. Do you know how we do it back in Africa? We do it like this. That's how we do it. To mean that they learned. And as the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. Right. And so they try to warn white people about all these crazy things that they were supporting. That includes Mr. Donald Trump, because they saw Mr. Donald Trump for who it is. But guess what? They didn't listen. How could they listen to just a black person who don't understand anything about what they are saying? That's how they believed, right? How could they understand a person that doesn't have a job, a person who is lazy, a person who just depends on welfare? That's according to how they thought about black people. But as time went by, everything that black people warned them about became like a prophecy, because it started happening one by one, just like how they said it. And they started seeing this happening one by one. And so as a result, it was time for them to learn. Remember that for many years, black Americans have warned the United States that building a culture of authoritarianism, white supremacy, and economic inequality would eventually harm everyone. That's including white people. Right? These warnings were not just theoretical. They were grounded in lived experience. Black communities have long been the first targets of state violence, political oppression, and economic exploitation because they have historically felt the edge of Americans' cruelty firsthand. They were able to recognize Donald Trump's rhetoric and policies a continuation of forces they had already endured. When white Americans dismissed these warnings as exaggerations or bitterness, they ignored a prophetic insight which was rooted in lived experience and history, because black people have lived history. And so they tried to warn them. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to be letting you to watch this video, and then I'll be back. I'll be sharing my thoughts. If you're watching me for the first time, you know how we do it. I'm just asking you to please pause, like the video, share, subscribe, so that we can get people who are like-minded like you, so that we can have these great discussions about these issues. So let's watch the video. I'll be back with my thoughts in regards to this.
Because it sure as hell isn't the people doing the work. We're out here treading water while billionaires build rockets, politicians trade stocks, and corporations raise prices just because they can. We were promised opportunity, we got survival. And what makes this worse is watching people blame themselves. Like somehow you failed because you can't afford a one-bedroom anymore. Like you didn't do enough, when the truth is the math just stopped adding up years ago. They told us to work harder, but never told us they'd change the finish line. This isn't a country full of lazy people. It's a country full of exhausted ones. Simple as that.
I'm really starting to think that Trump is purposely trying to destroy the U.S. economy and get America to collapse the way the USSR did, so that him and his billionaire buddies can buy everything up for pennies on the dollar and turn us into a full-blown oligarchy the way Russia did after the USSR collapsed. That's the only thing that makes sense in my brain, because everything that he is doing is isolating America from its allies. He is destroying trade on the world stage with us and all of the people we do trade with. I mean, China's putting exports on restrictions on all of their rare earth exports at this point. There's literally nothing that he's done since he took office that is good for the American people or the American economy. Everything that he has done has been for billionaires and has been at the detriment of the U.S. as a country. Like, our entire workforce is being decimated now as he is sending a whole bunch of people out of the country who used to do jobs like construction and farming. So we're going to have a food shortage because there's not enough people picking the food. We're going to have a worse housing problem because there's not enough people building the houses. And it literally seems like everything that he is doing is just designed to destroy this country. And yet the MAGA people are still licking his boots. It's wild.
I'm at the point in my life where I feel like if this is not fucking rock bottom, I don't know what is. Because I told my director, I told everyone my situation. I have 6 days to figure out a second job, and then the job that I have now just cut me back to part-time. I have 3 kids. I'm about to be fucking homeless. And I don't know what to do. Like, I told them my situation, and they basically were like, let's kick this bitch while she's down. So now it looks like I'm going to be finding 2 jobs instead of just having to find another one. I feel like this is never going to get better. I fucking hate being an adult, and never in my life have I struggled this fucking bad, and this is the most money that I've ever made.
This isn't me trying to fearmonger, this is just me trying to prepare you. The US economy right now is like a Jenga tower with 18 fucking pieces missing. We are one piece pulled out away from everything just toppling down. AI was responsible for 40% of US GDP growth this past year and 80% of US stock growth. And the manufacturing industry has contracted for 7 consecutive months, while every other economic indicator is saying this is as bad as things have been since 2009. Now, when you have a sentence that says the economy is as bad as it's been since 2009, you are fucked. So again, this is not me fear-mongering, this is just me preparing you. Our economy is in a very bad place. If you have a job, hold on to it with everything you have.
America is falling behind. When an authoritarian regime attacks academia, science, news reporters, free speech, students, the best and the brightest leave. The same thing happened in Germany, in Russia, in Greece, and it's happening here. And this hurts the country because all of the talent is going elsewhere to help another country.
Bankruptcies are skyrocketing. Right now, more trucking companies are going bankrupt, more restaurants. Farm bankruptcies are up 35% higher than 2024. Hi, today is your update in the economy. It's October 12th, 2025. We are day 12 of the government shutdown. Our economy is collapsing every single day. Look at this. Airports are a disaster. Last time we had government shutdown in 2018, we lost $3 billion every week in travel alone. Let's not forget about the safety. Donald Trump fires over 4,000 government workers, and now museums and all that stuff in Washington are closed. Washington has an unemployment rate of 6% before the government shutdown. Expect a catastrophic crisis in Washington. We have lost over 1 million jobs this year. Inflation is 2.9%. Groceries are up 29%. We are in a recession in 22 states. We are in a recession in construction. We are in a recession in manufacturing. The stock market tanked on Friday, dropping 900 points. Drop a comment below if you want to stay on the algorithm to get your update on the economy and the stock market on Monday, October 13th.
I'm going to make a video that is very high level in finance, but needs to be redirected to as many eyeballs as possible because this is eventually going to affect everyone, including yourself. And this is not a doom and gloom. This is simply just a high level overview of what is coming and what the impacts will have on your life. I've made videos about this stuff before, but they've been very in-depth. So I want to make a video that is much higher level overview to give everyone an understanding for themselves and how they can prepare. On August 11th, the United States national debt surpassed 37 trillion. Now you might ask, well, why is this really important? Well, October 2025, or September, I guess you could say the end of September, is when the national debt, or essentially the fiscal year of 2025, ended. And we ended at a debt of 37.6 trillion, which means in a month and a half, we added another $600 billion to the national debt. The United States economy, when you look underneath the surface, it isn't doing too hot. Again, I'm not going to go into the weeds, but when you look into the data, it's really not actually doing that hot. And with that, we have 10 companies, 10 tech companies that are keeping the economy, quote unquote, afloat. Problem with this is it's very much looking very bubblish, very 2001, very 1929-esque. Now, the problem with this is the United States government has way too much debt. We are at something called a debt to GDP ratio of 125%. I think it's a little more now, like 125.4%. The reality of the situation is if the United States economy takes a turn downward because these companies aren't able to produce the results that they're essentially being invested into at the valuations that they have, or essentially you can put it in terms of like they're looking as shiny as they can be. And if they're not as shiny as they actually are, later down the road, then everything in the market could essentially pop. Now, the problem with this is the United States economy, or the United States government, has been a backstop. The United States government does not have the financial capability to backstop this bubble popping. And the genuine concern is that if this bubble pops, the United States government will not be able to it will not be able to bring in the money that is able to then fund the government, the debt itself. And so typical things like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, the largest expenses to the government will have to start dwindling. Now, if this gets even more severe, how does this start to affect the socio-political sphere? And what if the money itself for things like subsidies of energy, like oil, or subsidies for things like food, what if that starts getting affected and farmers can't produce the food that we need, and oil companies can't produce the energy that we need, and we have essentially a sell-off and the inability to fuel the people that we have? What happens then? And genuinely, I would typically say, hey, the United States will be able to get through this. Humans have ingenuity, and we have the ability to see the problems, be able to work around the problems, create solutions to the problems. But the only caveat to this is when you have a problem, it tends to be something that's a little more concrete. But what we're talking about now is not a concrete problem. What we're talking about is a system failure, a point where the actual government, the entire thing that we know of collectively as what we all bank on as being secure, pops, and it goes away. And that's the genuine concern. And so the spiral looks like this. The hype gets real in artificial intelligence that it's going to be able to boost productivity and help us grow out of the national debt. Then the productivity, the AI bubble pops instead of it being a real boom. And then that spirals over to the government not having the capital or the money to be able to fund the debt. And then the debt spirals, and then the debt causes the United States government to go insolvent. And then the entire populace turns into a socio-political, violent collapse. This definitely isn't a conversation you want to have over a dinner table. But again, more people need to be aware of this situation, because it is a process that is playing out right in front of our eyes. So let's talk about it now before the situation actually is around the corner.
I don't think people realize how quickly Trump is tanking the economy. When Trump took office, he inherited the strongest economy for an incoming president since George W. Bush. Job growth was booming, wages were up, inflation was down, and the stock market was climbing. Fast forward to today, and Trump's tariffs and his economic agenda have thrown everything in reverse. The new jobs report is brutal. The economy added just 22,000 jobs in August, about 50,000 jobs short of expectations. But the revisions for June and July were even worse. For the first time in 4 years, since the last time Trump was president, the economy actually lost jobs. And it's hitting some of our most important industries the hardest. Over the last 3 months, we've lost 31,000 manufacturing jobs, 13,000 mining jobs, and about 10,000 construction jobs. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is raiding factories and stripping legal status from 1 million immigrants, which in their absurd theory was supposed to help the most vulnerable American workers. But black unemployment is now at 7.5%, the highest in 4 years, and youth unemployment for 16 to 24-year-olds is at 10.5%. And it's not just jobs. In July, we also saw one of the biggest monthly spikes in inflation, which is now at its fastest pace in 5 months. And families are feeling it, with back-to-school supplies up 7.3% this year. And to put the cherry on top, after Trump inherited 12 straight quarters of economic growth, our economy actually shrank in the first quarter of this year, and has remained slow as consumers brace for even higher prices. A lot of Americans held their noses and voted for Trump, thinking that he'd fix the economy. But like everything else with him, his thirst for power and control has led to utter chaos. And unless we call it out now, he'll continue to lie and drive our economy off the cliff. So share this video and follow me to stay in the loop.
The U.S. Department of Labor released a memo just a few days ago explaining that Donald Trump's policies are in fact already ruining your lives, but they're about to actually make your life so much worse to the point where you may not even be able to purchase food. And again, this is coming from the United States Department of Labor under Donald J. Trump himself. His own Labor Department had to put out this memo or letter or whatever it is you want to call it to warn Americans that this guy is ruining your life. And of course, he's doing it, according to the Labor Department, by deporting all of the farm workers in the United States. We already have a massive shortage of labor on American farms. We have had farmers, representatives come out and tell us that. The farmers themselves have come out and told us that. We don't have people to go out there and do the work, to pick the crops, to till the fields, to plant the seeds. We don't have human beings to do that now because of Trump's policies. And a lot of those people voted for those policies. But as I've always said, I'm on the fence about sympathy because when the farmers go under, all of us are affected. If it were just them suffering the consequences of their votes, you get what you vote for, right? But their suffering leads to suffering for all of us. So, we're all in the same boat on this one because every human being on the planet has to have food to survive. And we're at a point, according to the Labor Department, you may not be able to afford it anymore. Here is what they said. The current and imminent labor shortage, exacerbated by the near total cessation of the inflow of illegal aliens, increased enforcement of existing immigration law, and global competitiveness pressures described below, presents a sufficient risk of supply shock-induced food shortages to justify immediate implementation. The lack of undocumented and documented workers results in significant disruptions to production costs and threatening the stability of domestic food production and prices for U.S. consumers.
All right, so SNAP is going away in November. There's no more money. I was at No Kings yesterday, and I was talking with a federal worker who runs a welfare office. And he was telling me that him and his staff have been training for de-escalation because there are going to be some very angry people going to that office asking why their kids are going hungry. They're going to be very angry, and this is going to be people's breaking point. Like that's just all there is to it. And especially for November, when it's supposed to be a time about food, especially around Thanksgiving. So all I'm going to say is if you see somebody grabbing up some food, trying to run away with it, no, you didn't. You didn't see shit. If you see somebody desperately trying to get food, you did not see a damn thing. You were paying attention to your children. You got focused on the products that you were browsing. You have a hard time hearing. I'm deaf in my left ear. I can't hear very well, especially directional hearing. My directional hearing is bad. Or maybe you're having some temporary blurry vision. You didn't see shit. You saw nothing.
I want us all on the same page. The reason there may not be any SNAP benefits in November is because Trump cut the budget to the USDA, which runs SNAP. Not only that, he basically gutted the emergency funding for SNAP. It went from billions of dollars to $500 million. Now, during Trumpy's first term, we had the longest shutdown in the history of this country, but SNAP benefits were never threatened. Why? Because the USDA was fully funded to include emergency measures, which paid for SNAP benefits. Now, millions of Americans may go without their SNAP benefits because of Trumpy's cuts. And remember, just a few months ago, they told us they were no longer going to report the status of hunger in this country. Because if you can't prove you're hungry, nobody's going to give a fuck.
Why aren't Americans out on the streets protesting Trump's policies like they do over in Europe? Well, I'll take a shot at answering that. I'm not an expert, but I have opinions on the subject. If you're willing to listen, I'm willing to share. To begin with, I think there's a significant group of Americans who are simply apathetic. They don't care. They're willing to let the next guy handle it. They don't want to stick their necks out. There is yet another group of Americans who are simply so beaten down by the struggle of day-to-day life in this country that they don't have the energy to care. If you're a banker, if you're an attorney, if you're an engineer or an architect, a medical professional, or if you're in one of the specialized trades like electrical or plumbing, you can make a very good life here. But if you're not, there's a good chance you're struggling. And when you come home at night after that second job, all you want to do is collapse on the couch and put your feet up. You don't want to go out marching. I think Americans tend to have a negative perception of protesters, probably stemming from the days of the Vietnam War, when college students were out in the streets clashing violently with police. Americans, despite all the braggadocio and bravado, are a fairly docile bunch of people. They do what they're told. Additionally, there can be negative consequences for protesting in this country. For example, American corporations are incredibly sensitive to how they are perceived in the public eye. If it became known that a group of their employees was out marching in the streets and waving signs, there might be negative consequences. Those employees could face severance. I had a boss one time tell me that he didn't want to see me out marching in gay pride parades. It happens. Additionally, there's the risk of physical harm. It wouldn't surprise me at all to hear that a group of MAGA brown shirts had descended on some protesters and tried to beat them up. And you have to remember that Americans are armed to the teeth. Guns are everywhere. In my state, you can carry a gun in your pocket without a permit or a license. But I think the biggest reason that Americans are not out protesting in the streets about Trump's policies is that they agree with them. I know that sounds incredible, but it's true. This is an aggrieved group of people who do not want the nation sharing its wealth with other countries. They feel like America has been taken advantage of by other countries. They are tired of seeing us give away our money and our resources to other countries. They don't want people from other countries coming over here to take advantage of the benefits and the opportunities that we have. They don't want to share. Back in World War I or World War II, you would have called these people isolationists. They don't want to get involved. They don't care what happens to Ukraine. They don't care what happens to Taiwan. They don't care what happens to Europe. They simply want to keep everything to themselves. In order to understand the American mindset, you have to know something about the way Americans live, because it is dramatically different than the way people in Europe live. In Europe, people read books, they go to museums, they travel, they're exposed to other cultures, other languages, other lifestyles. They're much more cosmopolitan in their perception of how the world exists and how we all get along with each other. Here in the States, it's completely the opposite. If you watched American TV commercials, you would think that we spend our discretionary time out rock climbing or kissing under the stars or roping cattle or doing any number of things that keep us engaged with each other. The fact is, we don't live like that at all. In America, people adore technology, and they have been seduced by media. And by media, I don't mean the news media, I mean the medium itself. Television, movies, the internet, video games. They spend a great deal of their discretionary time consuming media. And the problem with America's fascination with technology and its adoration of media is that it can be very isolating. For instance, in America, you don't have to go to an office building to work anymore. You can work from home. You don't have to go to the grocery store or to the department store to pick up your goods. You can just have them delivered. You don't have to go out to a restaurant to enjoy a meal. Have it delivered to your house. You don't have to go to a movie theater to watch a movie. Just stream it on your computer or your TV. So Americans spend a great deal of time home alone. They are not exposed to a multiplicity of cultures or languages or experiences. They're home alone. And because this technology allows them to do it, they can curate their information sources so that they only hear the information that they want to hear. In other words, their biases are confirmed over and over and over. So in Europe, where you have large groups of people living in close proximity to each other, with a variety of cultures, a variety of languages, and a variety of worldviews, here in the United States, you tend to have people living in silos and echo chambers of confirmation bias. Is it any wonder that Americans live in such extreme conditions? There's no middle ground in this country anymore. You're either extreme left or extreme right. The middle ground has been eliminated by the technology that enables people to be alone all the time. We've basically become a nation of angry sociopaths. And that's why people don't get out and protest, because they agree with Trump is doing. Trump appeals to their confirmation bias. The country is like an open wound, and Trump is quite literally the infection that is exploiting that open wound. So if you're wondering why Americans don't protest, I think that's why.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I hope you've heard what white people came out to talk about these things, and also black people that have sentiments in regards to this, because at the end of the day, we all observed the great MAGA lie. We have all observed the great lie that was ever given to white people, but they don't learn. And we've tried to understand different concepts. Why do white people vote against their own interest? Because at the end of the day, politicians have their own interest. It is game of interests at the end of the day. But why would you sabotage yourself? Right? One of the questions that we usually ask ourselves. First, white America thought that they were protected. And I'm going to be breaking it down. I'm going to be discussing with you how and why they thought that they were protected. Many white Americans believed that democracy's worst abuse would never touch them. They assumed the system would always protect white citizens, even under a reckless leader. But Trump's administration showed that once authoritarian power grows, it is not always selective. It can harm anyone who stands on its ways. Policies like attacking democratic norms, corruption in government, weaponizing agencies, and targeting dissent did not remain confined to black communities. White Americans began to realize that the forces of oppression they tolerated when directed at minorities were now threatening the whole structure of society, something that they ignore. But right now, they are learning and they are seeing the magnitude of their ignorance. They are learning how they wished they would have listened to black people. But it's too late. I guess it's too late. and they're cutting their L's and seeing what to do about it, right? What Trump did is to expose the fragility within the white institutions. Let me break it down to you. Trump did not create racism, and that's just the truth. We need to agree with that. He gave it open permission. How? His presidency revealed the fragility of institutions many white Americans trusted: the courts, law enforcement, Congress, and even the media. When these institutions bent easily under his influence, white people realized that their safety was never guaranteed by strong democratic values, but by racial privilege. And here's where it gets interesting. And when Trump showed a willingness to destroy institutions to retain power, white Americans felt the same danger Black Americans have felt for generations, living under the system that can turn against you at any damn moment. And so you're trying to see how all these things happen and how they occur in real time. All these economic changes, they hit white Americans big time. Let's talk about white constructors. Let's talk about white farmers. Trying to see how this has really hit them big time. That was a big blow to a lot of Texas farmers, Nebraska farmers, right? And all these things affected white people big time. I'm not saying that it didn't affect Black people. It did. But look at the magnitude of how it happened. And then you'll understand what we are trying to say. The chaos under Trump, economic instability, rising extremism, declining public services, and weakening middle class hit many white Americans hard. They found themselves facing job insecurity, always been familiar to Black communities who have lived long in marginalized economies and unstable political conditions. As white Americans experienced this crisis personally, they began acknowledging that Black people had been right about the direction in which the country was heading. Regrets comes. You've heard phrases like, we should have listened to Black people. Yes, they should have listened, but they couldn't listen. Right? Regrets. They're remorseful for not listening for the decision that they made. After witnessing police militarization, attacks on voting rights, COVID negligence, and rising white extremist violence, many whites recognized that Black voices were better interpreters of American danger. Black scholars, activists, and ordinary citizens had warned that America's obsession with whiteness would eventually consume itself. The January 6th attack was a turning point. Remember that. White Americans saw white mobs attacking the government while being treated with far more leniency than peaceful Black protesters. This moment made undeniable the reality that Black people had long described. White supremacy is not only morally wrong, but dangerous to national stability. If you understand that. Now, over time, everything that Black people have been saying has become a survival tool for Americans. Black Americans have acted as a reference point because the truth that they gave are indeed the things that are affecting Americans even today. Only that they didn't take their time to listen to the warnings that black people were trying to give them, right? So today, as white Americans struggle with consequences of Trump's politics, many acknowledge that black insight is not just about race. It is about national survival. Black communities have centuries of experience navigating, oppressive system and resisting authoritarian structures. And these warnings were not only moral critique, but they were strategic guidance. With the nation facing political chaos, declining global influence, and internal division, many now recognize that listening to black voices is essential for rebuilding America. The lesson is so much clear. Ignoring the oppressed eventually leads the entire society towards their collapse. Brothers and sisters, I'm your host and presenter Talk Stories. And if you're watching me for the first time, I'm asking you to please subscribe to the channel, join the membership, and really get to what I can offer you. For those who are always supporting me through my Cash App, man, I'm really, really grateful for the support that you are giving me. So let me see you on my next video. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.